Hello everybody, welcome to this week's live stream. Just to explain how it all works, we do these every Friday usually, and it's a catch up with the major markets, indices, FX, gold, oil, a couple of cryptos, and then once I've gone through all of that, I go through the questions, any questions about any stuff we look at, and of course any markets you want looking at. And normally these things run for an hour. If someone can just confirm that the sound is all working okay, if your sound is a bit quiet, it should all be okay, but if you just make sure you've got the volume bumped up on the YouTube window at your end, that'd be great. Right, that's that. This is what it is. Let's do the risk warning. This presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones and Capital.com accept no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. Spread bets and CFDs are complex instruments and come with a high risk of losing money rapidly due to leverage. 76.25% of retail investor accounts lose money when spread betting and or trading CFDs with this provider. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets and CFDs work and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Right, a quick look at some of the important events, news for next week. So 2nd of August, Monday, US manufacturing PMI, so factory gate inflation, as it's often referred to. Clearly, inflation is a hot topic at the moment for markets, so that could be interesting. Early hours of Tuesday, we've got the Australian interest rate decision. Thursday next week, UK rate decision. Rates are important, I think, at the moment, or what the central banks say around rates and their view on the economy. Again, because of this concern by some about where inflation might be as the year goes on. The US central bank has said it expects inflation to be temporary. Let's see how temporary that ends up being. So I think these rate decisions are quite interesting to watch, and we could see some volatility around them. And then, of course, the big one for next week is non-farm payrolls. So US unemployment numbers come out next Friday. So they come out 1:30 my time, UK time, next Friday. So we'll start next Friday's webinar an hour after those have come out, 2:30 next week. So it'll be interesting to see how the market reacts to all of that. That's it. So we're going to jump into the markets now. Just a quick talk through the links. Find out more about the company, Capital.com. Of course, go to Capital.com. You can open a demo account, download a trading account, download our apps, open a real account to trade all these different markets we're looking at today. To find out more about me and trading stuff throughout the week, davidjonestrading.com. There's information on there or a link on there to the trading training course I launched a couple of months ago. Any questions after this, drop me an email, david.jones@capital.com. Follow me on Twitter, @JonesTheMarkets, and of course follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Right, let's get into it. So, markets. I thought we'd start off with the NASDAQ, actually, the NASDAQ index. And we did see last night, yesterday, the S&P 500 index hit fresh all-time highs during yesterday's session. And then we had some earnings out last night. Amazon was the big one. I think exceeded expectations, but I think in common with Apple as well, I'm sure someone else, who I can't remember, was it Facebook? A bit of a cautious outlook for the next quarter as people return back to work and perhaps aren't spending so much time online buying stuff. So I think we saw quite a big sell-off in the after-hours market. If I flip over, I'll show you. Then we'll look at the NASDAQ in a bit more detail. So here's the move, really. So from that big candle there, that's from 9 o'clock UK time. So that was after US markets officially closed and the Amazon results came out. So quite a bit of a hit indices took in after-hours markets. But I do wonder if they'll claw it back today. I did do a trade on my own account on the S&P ahead of today's open. I wonder if we'll see something of a bounce back today, perhaps a bit of a short-term overreaction. But anyway, let's get into it and have a look at the NASDAQ. The trend is still up. I say this every week because the trend is still up every week. You know, we're going back to the March lows here on the NASDAQ. down about 6,700, more than doubled. March 2020 lows, of course. More than doubled since then. We saw fresh all-time highs for the Nasdaq. We've seen it this month, just over the last week or so. We've seen it. So for me, for now, any weakness in this market still looks like a buying opportunity. Personally, we've got the trend line coming in about 14,000. I think we'd need a much deeper sell-off than that to suggest the trend was ending. So for me, the bias in a market like that is still towards the upside, still looking to be a buyer of dips and a buyer of breakouts and all that sort of stuff. So I think today will be interesting in US indices after the big sell-off, relatively big sell-off last night. You can see it got hit, but it's only traded back. It didn't take out Tuesday's low. So, big news that it falls after hours, but Tuesday's low around just below 14,800 held. The market traded down, when was it? Between 6 and 7 this morning to 14,820. So I do wonder if perhaps, while we might not see yesterday's highs reclaimed, if we do see something of a gentle strength today. Let's see how it works out. Let's take a look at the S&P though, because the S&P did hit all-time highs yesterday. Flip it over to a daily. Hold on a second. There we go. So there you can see this is the daily candle we're looking at here, and the S&P just about scraping out to all-time highs, but then gave it all up pretty quick as the day went on. Here we go. There's the all-time highs, about 6:30 my time. So about halfway through the session, sells off into the close and then dumps after the close, the S&P, again, as those Amazon results came out. But once again, sells off, and we held again above Tuesday's low. I ended up buying in today about here on the S&P, and the markets are just opening now. So far we are seeing a bit of a gentle bounce back, or as the markets open. Let's see what happens. But to go back to the daily charts, the trend is still up. S&P chart going back to March 2020 again. Nice little move there. Look at that move. Beginning of July. Oh no, middle of July. Sorry, 19th of July. A bit of chart porn there. Back to the trend line on the S&P. So ahead of 4,200, and we saw a strong bounce back off there. So for me, we've got this whole block of support running from the May lows at 4,035. Then we've got 4,135-ish from June. Then the most recent lows ahead of 4,200. Yeah, I think there's a classic saying that bull markets climb a wall of worry. So people buy in, and there's always a lot of chatter about when the next crash is coming. And clearly, no market goes up forever. There's been a lot of talk over the last few months about the impending correction, and the markets have carried on up. So for me, no sign of an impending correction at the moment. Famous last words. But I think for me, it would take a slide back through 4,000 to really signal this trend was over. So a 10% drop in the S&P from here. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But for me, I'd still be expecting higher highs. I mean, you could say that perhaps we've got a bit of what's it called, bearish divergence going on. It's not the best textbook example, but the market's pushed to a high. RSI makes a high. Market pushes higher still, but we've got a lower high on the RSI. Maybe it's a little bit overstretched in the short to medium term, but for me, again, if we saw a deeper sell-off from here, I'd be looking to buy the dips. So let's see. Just a quick one to those of you who are dropping stuff in to look at in the questions. That's good. We'll go through these markets and I'll look at that. But if you could say what the market is, because someone's just put in TCEHY, I've got no idea what that is, just in case we haven't got that code on our system. So if you could type in the name of the thing you want looking at, that'll save us a bit of time. So there's the S&P. DAX, take a look at that, German stock market. It's been a bit of a lagger, the DAX, but again, the trend is still up, but a bit of a lagger over through July, really. The trend is still up from those March lows. It's interesting, again, at the S&P, we had that sell-off on the 19th of July, but it was pretty much caught by that trend line. So for me, for the DAX, not quite as exciting as the S&P at the moment, but lots of support, 14.8 through to, 15.2, I suppose. So I think only if it starts pushing below 14.8 does it start to look a bit more, perhaps a bit bearish, but overall still positive. as all these stocks are. And it does feel like I say the same thing every week on them, but the trend is up. What can you do? For me, you've got to be a buyer of dips. FTSE, FTSE is always a bit of a funny one, the FTSE, but it got knocked back really hard. Arguably, this looks the more vulnerable out of the ones we've looked at so far. Got knocked back really hard, slipped very briefly on the 19th of July to its lowest in 2 months, 2.5 months nearly. So for me, it's just a bit of a choppy, scrappy mess perhaps at the moment, but I'd still rather be a buyer of dips on the FTSE than a seller of strength at the moment because of this corresponding strength in US markets. Nikkei, weird old market, the Nikkei. I mean, it's just been correcting since February. And we're still in that correction, which again is something it feels like I've been saying every week now. 27,000 is sort of proving to be the floor. And it's been the case for 6 months now, nearly 7 months in the Nikkei. And I think if it breaks 27,000, we could see a bit more pressure to the downside build. But I've still got, I think I mentioned it, I've got my oldest long position, I think, is in the Nikkei from December. And it might be slightly in profit, but it's just doing nothing. And I do wonder if 27,000 breaks, do we see perhaps a deeper sell-off for the Nikkei? We need to break above, at least 29 to shake off this correction. So that is actually the worst looking stock market index chart we've looked at, followed by the FTSE. So the Nikkei still in that correction mode at the moment. So that's stocks. What's your oil? Should we have a look at oil? I saw that oil was getting a bit of a move on just before it came on. Someone asked about the trade, the Brent oil trade. That ended up being a great trade so far. Just to explain, if you're watching this for the first time, on the channel, we do regular market stuff during the week. And I did Brent oil about a week ago, wasn't it? It must have been. And the trades got filled. So that trade has done incredibly well. So this is the account that I use for the videos we do. And I always try and do a trade in the videos because it makes things a bit more interesting. So bought Brent oil on the 19th and the 20th of July. Don't know why I did it twice, but whatever. But so far, that trade is up, where's it gone? 830 quid, which is pretty good for, I think, 250 risk per trade there. But let's take a look at West Texas. I bought this yesterday, actually, for my own account, because I thought it was a really logical setup. And I just noticed, just as I came on, that it was starting to break out through yesterday's high. And the reason I bought it yesterday, I mean, for me, the trend for crude, there you go. So I bought it about here yesterday because it's gone a little bit sideways for about a few days, and it started breaking out early yesterday morning, sold off and held, so I bought it, and it's pushed a little bit higher today. Let's see, I wonder if we can get a move on and go back up to 75. But let's take a look at the dailies on crude oil. So if we pick up on that trend from April, so it looks for me something like that. Another move back to that trend line, like we saw in stock market indices. So, I think we have lost quite a bit of momentum during July. We had that agreement from OPEC Plus where they're going to start increasing production again. We've had production cuts in place from the OPEC Plus countries because clearly of the slowdown in demand for oil because of the pandemic. They're going to start ramping production up from August, and it's going to carry on every month from there. So I think that did clearly, supply and demand, all of that. More oil knocked the price back. But it's interesting that it has bounced back quite strongly. So for me, trend in oil is still up. I would be looking personally, if the trend is still up, I'm going to look for the old high to be hit, which is, where's that? above $76 a barrel. I'd still be a buyer of dips. We've had quite the shakeout middle of July. It's quite interesting how quickly we've seen it bounce back. So to me, that does demonstrate strength in the market. If it turned and broke below $65, then we can start to think, well, actually, maybe this trend is finally starting to run out of steam. But for me, the trend in oil is pretty obvious, isn't it? And it's been obvious for some time now. So for me, still be a buyer of dips in oil. If I didn't have a trade on at the moment, where would I look to be a buyer? I think if it got knocked back to maybe where it was yesterday. Clearly, we've got good short-term support from about $70 to $71. So for me, quite happy to stay long oil at the moment. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at gold. Let's have a look at that. So I've got a few trades on gold by the looks of things, I think, from various videos we did. I think I said, I didn't do the live stream last week because I was away last week, but I think I said the last time we did it, which would have been the 20th, hang on, when was it? What's 2 weeks off 30? The 16th would have been here. I said I wondered if we'd see a bit of oil strength come back the following week. Gold strength come back the following week. We didn't get it, but we've had it this week. And I do still think, the lows that we've seen in gold back here, March and April, now these are important lows, and we saw a big run from 1675 above 1900, got knocked back. So for me, if I was a betting man, I'd be looking for where's the next $100 move coming in gold. I'd be more up than down, I think, at the moment, although the trading has perhaps been a bit scrappy over the last couple of weeks. But I'd still be happy to be. And there you go. If you look at the last 2 weeks or so, it's pretty scrappy, isn't it? So I suppose as a short-term trader, what would you do up here? Perhaps short-term, you might want to go short with a stop above 1835, those recent highs, to see if we get knocked back below 1800 again. So perhaps a little bit scrap at the moment, but for me, still bullish. But perhaps if I didn't have a trade on, I might wait and see if it gets knocked back to 1800. So perhaps not the most exciting looking chart at the moment, gold, but overall, for me, on the dailies at least, still mildly positive. And obviously, it will get a lot more interesting if we do see inflation being more of an issue as the year goes on. Let's have a look at the cryptos. Bit of crypto excitement this week. I think we did do a video on what was it? Ethereum yesterday. So that did we put that up yesterday. But what am I talking about? Bitcoin. Big moves this week. It started a week ago. I think the move started from just over a week ago, and I think was fueled by this rumor that Amazon were going to start accepting payments in cryptocurrency, and then really, put a rocket under the price of the cryptos. Amazon denied it, so Amazon have said that's not the case. It's interesting, I suppose. It has managed to hold on to those, but it hasn't changed anything. It's been an exciting week or so because the price of Bitcoin has gone from 30,000 to 40,000, but it doesn't change for me this just this sideways range we're in. So looking something like that, we've got the top up there and we've got the bottom down here around 28,000. So 28 to 42 has been the range. So although we've seen a lot of volatility, for me it doesn't change anything. And if I had to do a trade on Bitcoin, I'd be looking perhaps to go short up here because we're back at the top of the range. So for me, until it breaks, we have a decisive break, either up or down, we're still in this range. So, a great run. And if you caught that, that's a big move. It's a 30% move in Bitcoin since the 20th of July, but it hasn't really changed that overall range. So when we break out of the range one way or the other, it gets a bit more interesting. Same for Ethereum, I'm guessing. Let's have a look at Ethereum. Yeah, same old stuff, isn't it? We've got arguably a wider range in Ethereum, but it wouldn't surprise me if we saw them back under some pressure next week. I think the overall cryptos. So let's see what happens. What should we look at next? Currencies. I think FX. I've got a trade on the pound as well. Actually, I've had a trade on the pound for about a week now. But let's have a look at it. And we've seen a bit of a run. Clearly, we've seen since the Fed statement on the US central bank statement on Wednesday night, seen a bit of a run, a bit of weakness in the US dollar, and a lift in the pound and the euro. Again, if we looked at the pound going back to late Feb, you could argue it has been a bit boring. We've been fairly sideways in the pound. I thought what was interesting was this break on the 20th of July below what had been, really good support from March and mid-April. And it ended up being a false break. These can often be really good signals, trading a false break, where the market breaks and we're expecting it to sell off, but the next day, bang, reverses, and we actually have a bullish engulfing candlestick there. I did do a video that went up, I think yesterday, on engulfing patterns. I'm not a massive fan of chart patterns, but things like engulfing patterns on candlesticks I think can be really interesting to pay attention to. And we did have bullish engulfing on pound on the 21st of July, and it's really motored higher since then. It's moved like 250 points again since then. I do wonder if perhaps it starts to run out of steam up here. So I'm still long, I think, but I've got my stop loss about here on my trade, just about 139. And I wonder, even though the trend is still up, the short-term chart on the hourly chart anyway, the trend is still up, looking at something like that. You know, we're running into an area from June, late June, that has been something of a problem, you know, 139 to 140. Let's see what happens. I think if we get a breakout through 140, then perhaps we'll see a bit more strength and a run up to 142. So it's an interesting market to watch next week, I think, pound against the US dollar. But I'd just be a little bit wary up here that perhaps some of that momentum we've seen starts to run out of steam. But for now, still strong at the end of the week. Let's take a look at Euro US dollar. I think this is interesting, Euro US dollar, because it's come back near to a pretty big level from late March, Euro US dollar. So for me, 117, it's a really, really big level. It's come all the way from 122.50 in May down to 117.50. And we've clearly built quite the base here, and it's got to move on. And I do wonder if perhaps we do see a base built for the euro down here. I probably wouldn't want to buy it now up here. If we get a bit of a weakness next week and it holds again above 117.50, then perhaps it's a trading opportunity. But I think these 117.50 lows for euro dollar are quite interesting ones, I think, going into next week. Let's take a quick look at Robinhood. I don't know if we covered them yet. They only IPO'd yesterday, didn't they? Oh, there we go. So they IPO'd yesterday at, was it $38 a share? And it's been the worst performing IPO in some time, apparently. So it's the broker that a lot of US traders use, obviously because it was commission free. And I think got a lot of press this year when they were restricting trades in some of these meme stocks like GME, GameStop, whatever they are, and AMC. But they IPO'd yesterday, so they did touch 40 yesterday, currently trading at $34.46, so you can trade that with us. Again, what would you do? We've only got 2 days worth of data, or not even that actually. What would you do? I suppose if you really wanted to be a buyer, I'd have my stop the other side of $33 at the moment on that, or perhaps you wait to see if there's a bit more strength and go short on them. But there's Robinhood. I thought we'd have a quick look at those. So that's it on the usual markets we cover. So I think, for me, what's interesting? Well, stocks are interesting because they got hit so much yesterday, and this is the S&P, clawing a bit of it back today. So I think stock markets are interesting because all-time highs yesterday on the S&P, bullish sign, gets knocked back by the dip. That's what I was doing anyway. Let's see what happens for the rest of today. So I think that's interesting. Oil, I think, is interesting. We've lost some momentum during July, but overall you can see that's the recovery off those lows from just a few days ago. So I think that's interesting markets. And some of the currencies are interesting because we've seen US dollar weakness since that Fed decision. So let's get into some of the questions. Which of the ARK ETFs do you consider interesting to watch? I only watched one of them, so ARK, very high-profile ETF company led by, is it Cathie Wood, isn't it? So the one I tend to watch, I think, is, I don't know if it's the main one, but the ARK Innovation ETF is one to watch. Did really well last year, I think, in particular. Big Tesla holder, wasn't it? Bought a load of Robinhood stock yesterday, apparently, I saw on Twitter. But so went from about $34 a share in March 2020 to 158, 160 in Feb. Got knocked back a lot since then. So that's one I tend to watch, really, to keep an eye on, that one. And there are others as well, but I think it's an always interesting one to watch. It is a bit like a suppose, just a tech tracker overall. Underperformed the NASDAQ, of course, in recent months, but I think that's one I tend to take a look at. What are your thoughts about Chinese stocks and the Chinese market? I must admit, I've seen the news this week clearly about some of the big hits taken. Let's take a look at the China A50. But I haven't paid that much attention to it. It's gone crashing through its support, hasn't it? So the FTSE China A50 is down. What were the highs in Feb? About 20,600. It's down. We're now at 15,000, so it's lost, what, 20%, 25% since those Feb highs. So for me, when it comes to this one, I think it's quite interesting, because there's been a lot of news about the clampdowns in China and the hits that we've seen some of the stocks taking. And I think there comes a point where, okay, the news is all going to be factored into the price. So I think this might be, if that region or this market is one that's of interest to you, what does it look like next week? Do we see it hold above July lows? It's down to 12-month lows, pretty much almost at the moment. Do we see it hold above the July 2020 lows, that recent low? So it could be an interesting one to watch, actually, to see if we see the selling stop. Still looks a bit weak as of today. But it's not a market I follow that closely. But clearly, taken a lot of hits over recent months, and particularly in the last week or so. Right, let's have a look. Can we have a look at BP? Yes, BP. So UK oil. I used to have shares in BP up until about a year ago, I think. I think that's interesting that we had this trend in BP from October last year, when they were about £2 a share, 190 a share. And then if I adjust that trend line, so it looks something like that to the highs, then it falls out. And I think for me, from a trend following point of view, okay, it's fallen out of the trend line, but just because it's fallen out of the trend line doesn't necessarily mean that trend is over. I suppose if you really wanted to buy them, for me, and if I was a buyer now at 290, I would put my stop probably at 270 and take the view that perhaps it's overreacted to the OPEC plus decision on oil. So I think that could be perhaps an aggressive trade. But if it goes below 270, I think we do, for me anyway, we definitely have a new downtrend forming. So it's perhaps quite an interesting one to have a look at. Coca-Cola, so Coca-Cola, the UK listed stock, Coca-Cola. I must admit, I probably trade I don't know if they're two different companies, are they? It's just the UK listing of the US stock, I'm guessing. I don't know. I'd probably trade the US listing. But it still looks good, doesn't it? Looks pretty good. We got the trend off the lows. Recovery highs yesterday for the stock at £27.44 by the looks of it. So for me, I'd be a buyer. Probably the closest I'd want my stop, personally, if I was going for like a swing trade, would be the other side of these lows, which are only at the beginning of July. So the other side, they're quite a way away in percentage terms, I suppose 10% away. The other side of £25 maybe. But that trend looks pretty good, doesn't it? It'd be interesting to see what happens if it pushes back up to these sort of £29 highs just before the pandemic really bit markets in February, March last year. But that recovery trend looks pretty good, doesn't it? Right, what else have we got? Gold, we did gold, yeah. What do you think about BioNTech? BioNTech or biotech? Is BioNTech a thing? BioNTech SE, is it that one? What does that do? Clinical stage biotech company focused on... Okay. It looks good, doesn't it? So for me, from a trend following point of view, it looks great. The only problem I have, and I often say this, with these stocks that have really exploded, is where do you put your stop loss? For me, the most important part of the trade is where's the stop going to go? And the price of BioNTech has gone up, 50% in the last 3 weeks. So what do you do? I don't know. So for me, I'd have to be a buyer because the trend is up if I had to do something now. But where do you put your stop loss? I suppose we could flip it over to like the hourly chart, but it really has, raced away, hasn't it? So it's great if you're in it. For me, I always have a problem in trying to get into them when they move that quickly. So for me, if I was a buyer now at 312, I'd put my stop loss the other side of 270. But that trend is up. So for me, if it starts falling below 270, 260, 270, I'd worry that some of that euphoria was dying away. So we'll see. Is it Chipotle? Chipotle? I never know how to pronounce that. Let's have a look at those. Chipotle? Who knows? Is that the one? Is that the right one? Yeah, that's the right one. Let's have a look. Let's have a look on the dailies. Is this another popular meme stock? Again, the trend. I mean, the trend has been good. It's another one that's had a bit of a move on. It's up 20% over the last 11 days or so, isn't it? So as usual for me, if I'm going to buy it, where's the stop going to go? We've all gone a bit sideways and a bit boring, then starts breaking out. It still looks pretty strong, doesn't it? It looks like today it's made a new high for that move higher. Was that today it has? It's made a new high. It's always difficult, isn't it? Where would your stop go? If I was a buyer now at 1840, I don't know. I mean, these lows are just from a week ago. Perhaps they're 1600, which is giving it a lot of room. But the problem is, when it explodes like that, for me, it's always a difficult one when you're almost chasing the market, aren't you? But undeniably, the trend is up, and the trend was up before that explosion. So let's see. I'd probably rather buy a dip, but do we actually have a dip? 10 cent. Okay, 10 cent. We looked at those before, didn't we? I can't remember what they do. 10 cent. Investment holding company, internet value-added services in mainland China, Hong Kong, North America, blah, blah, blah. Okay. It still looks pretty weak, doesn't it? I mean, it's got really knocked over the last week or so, hasn't it? So for me, if we sort of went back in time, the trend off the March lows looked like that. Then it fell out of the trend, but thought, let's give it another chance. And it starts breaking down, and it's broken down again. So for me, the trend in that is down. So I wouldn't be. But for me, we've definitely flipped trends in that during July. So for me, the risk is that if it rallies, it just runs out of steam again. But perhaps it gets interesting if it trades down to $400. Let's keep coming back to it and see if it does make something of a base down there. Oh, so if you were a buy, so I wouldn't be a buyer now. If I had to buy it now, the closest I want my stop will be the other side of that low, which is only 2 days ago, down at 420, personally. But for me, the trend is down. Can we have a look at dollar yen? Yes, I do have a trade open on dollar yen actually, and I think I've given back a bit of profit. And it felt like it gone a bit boring. It's having a bit of a day to day. So for me, that trend was clearly up off the January lows into July. And we sort of lost the trend a bit. I'm still in the trade. For me, actually maybe this is the trade that we do today. I think it's quite interesting that the market got knocked back to 109. It's tried to have a run up. It's got knocked back again. And perhaps we're seeing 109 hold. And 109 was sort of a level from back here. So for me, that trend has definitely, that big trend from January, has definitely lost some momentum. And now this is like the last chance saloon trade for me on that trend. So for me, let's do the trade. Put a stop at 109, the other side of 109. Let's do 108.70 to see if it can recover this trend and push back up above 111 again. So the stop I would go below the 109. So 108.70 is a stop. We normally risk 100 quid on these live stream trades. So let's do that. So that would be, if I do 15,000, that's too much. 15,000, buying $15,000 yen. So I'm going to buy it because I think, we've had a bit of a retest. Perhaps it holds, and 109 is a big level. So 108.70 is the stop. Let's buy it. There we go. Done. So let's see. That's an interesting one to watch next week, actually, because I said that the US dollar got hit over the last couple of days after the Fed statement. Perhaps we'll see a bit of a comeback for the US dollar next week. Let's see how that trade pans out on that one. What is the best investment right now? The best investment right now? What a massive question that is. One that goes up immediately after you buy it. Who knows what the best investment is right now. But there are, I don't know. But if you find out, let me know. Have you heard any more about the start date in Australia? No, I haven't heard any more about that. Unfortunately, can't say any more on that. Natural gas, is it time to start shorting? I think I do have a trade on natural gas. Did a new trade this week on natural gas after closing out. My God, that's gone. No, that's the Nasdaq. Sorry, I'm getting confused. Where's that? Where's the natural gas trade? We did a video on natural gas this week. Oh, has it been stopped out? Oh no, it's there. It's down 60 quid at the moment. I think it's interesting. It is big run on natural gas, and it's gone from just in April about 250 to touched 416. I think we did a video earlier this week on natural gas. And for me, the trend is still up on natural gas. So I'd still be a buyer, personally. We'll see how it turns out, but I mean, clearly it's been knocked a bit over the last 24 hours or so. From a short-term point of view, be interesting to see if 380 holds. But for me, on the dailies, that trend is still up. But natural gas can be a ridiculously volatile market. I mean, it's moved 10% just since this week. Since the highs this week has moved 10%, or the highs last week, whenever it was. But for me, the trend is still up. 350 is maybe the big level to watch. If it breaks below there, perhaps that trend is in trouble. So I wouldn't be shorting, but if I had to go short now, the closest I want my stop would probably be above that July the 26th high, above 416, if I was going short natural gas. Do you get dividends on holding major indices? I think so. I think you do on FTSE and S&P. You do get a dividend, I think, as a price adjustment. But check it on the website. Can you check dollar against the Chinese currency? Yeah, dollar CN. Is it CNY or CNH? CNH. Let's have a look. What do you think? I think if I had to do anything, I'd probably be a buyer on dollar against the Chinese yuan, is it? I'd be a buyer probably, because you could. I don't know. What would you do? What we're seeing here from May 2020. This is the dollar losing ground against Chinese currency. So it would go from buying you just above 7 to in May this year buy you 6.3. So drop 10%. Is the dollar making a base? I suppose, again, the aggressive trade here, be a buyer of the dollar with a stop the other side of 645. It could be an interesting one to watch next week. I must admit, it's not one I watch at all during the week, but let's keep coming back to it and see, have we actually seen the US dollar form a base over the last 6 months against the Chinese currency? Let's see what happens. Apparently Amazon's dropping a lot. Let's have a quick look at Amazon after these results that came out yesterday. Oh, that's interesting. I'd be quite tempted to be a buyer, actually, because, and of course nothing today is financial advice, so don't blame me if you come in on Monday and Amazon is down 50%. That would cause some volatility, wouldn't it? It's interesting that Amazon have been in this sideways range since September of last year, capped by $3,500-ish, broke out on the last earnings, proved to be short-lived, went back into the range, broke out ahead of this earnings, and has been knocked back into the range again. So for me, an aggressive trade here would be to be, maybe let's do that. Let's do a trade on Amazon. So an aggressive trade here would be to be a buyer, because the trend since March, this is on the hourly charts, is still up. Has the market overreacted to the earnings? Who knows? But for me, I think it's interesting that that's the dump in the post-market yesterday. So from 9 o'clock, dumped. Trades as low as 3,300. Has a little look at 3,300 today, and we've seen it bounce. So perhaps let's do a little aggressive trade, catching the falling knife on Amazon. Should we go 32.30 for a stop? Let's see if I can actually do that. Have I got enough money in my account? 32.30 on Amazon for a stop. I can buy a fraction of a share. So if I buy 0.1, I need to buy, if I buy 1. So if I buy 1 share in Amazon, where it's trading now, so I'm using leverage, it's contracts for difference, I'll tie up 480 quid, I'll put a stop at 32.30. Let's see if we can buy the bottom on Amazon. Buy, done. There we go. It's going crazy today. Interesting to see. Interesting how this Because normally, I wouldn't normally watch stocks during the day, but it'll be interesting to see how Amazon works out today. If we do claw back some of those overnight losses because of its cautious guidance. Let's see what happens. Right, natural gas, we did that. CrowdStrike, the old favourite, CrowdStrike, which even I know now is a security company, isn't it, I think, from memory. Where is it? Security Solutions in the United States. There we go. CrowdStrike. It's still positive, isn't it? The trend is still up. A bit boring over the last month, to be honest, but that trend is still up, isn't it? So for me, what would I do? I think I'd rather wait for a sell-off, perhaps, if we get one to 220, or a break above 275 if it starts moving out to highs again. It's still positive, isn't it? Just a little bit dull lately. Do you think Marks and Spencer's is breaking the trend line? Let's have a look. Marks and Spencer's. Marks and Spencer's. It's always an interesting one, this, isn't it, for the state of the high street and all that. Oh, God, that's a horrible trend, isn't it? Look at that, over the years. Let's have a look. Let's take it right off all the data I've got going back to 2015. It's interesting, isn't it? So it was £6 a share back in 2015. Traded below £1 last year, below £1 last year. I would say I would be tempted, could be tempted to be a buyer. I suppose, I wonder what the dividend yield is on Marks and Spencer's. I suppose an aggressive trade would be to take the view, it's made a base from 2020, March 2020 to November 2020. It's broken out and looked to be a buyer of the dip and have a stop the other side of 120. I'm going to have a quick look, hang on a second, what the dividend yield is on M&S at the moment, or if they are still paying a dividend. Hang on a second. What am I looking for? So Marks, MKS, Marks and Spencer's, yield. Oh, they don't. No, they're not paying a dividend, are they? By the looks of it. Oh, no. But it's still interesting, I think. Still interesting down here to see if it can, if it's going to hold 120. But yeah, that could be an interesting sort of recovery play if you think Marks and Spencer's is going to recover from here. Let's see. Let's see how it goes. Platinum. Yeah, we didn't look at platinum, did we? I've got a trade in platinum, and I think I looked at it yesterday. I thought it looked okay, but actually maybe not. I was hoping that it was going to catch this trend and get a move on, and it really hasn't, has it? So I've got a trade with a stop the other side of 1,000 personally, because we've fallen out of the trend line. But again, it doesn't necessarily mean that trend is over. It looks like it was going back up, and then bang, it's come back down again. So I think this could be an interesting one next week for those of you who are fans of platinum, just to see if 1,000 holds. I think if it breaks 1,000, it does start to look as if that trend from March of last year is truly coming to an end. So I think that's an interesting one to watch next week. Let me just do, because let's just do the quick reminder of the contact. So Capital.com to find out more about the company, open an account, download our apps, all that sort of stuff. DavidJonesTrading.com, find out more about me and trading stuff during the week and the trading course. David.jones@capital.com is the email if you have any questions after this. @JonesTheMarkets is Twitter, and of course follow us on YouTube, Twitter and Facebook. And don't forget, we launched this stocks channel, so we do 3 stocks every week. We looked at a few stocks today, but if you look in the description of this video, there is a link to our stocks channel. So that's me doing stocks during the week. So take a look at some of those. I'm really quite curious about this Amazon trade now. Oh, we're losing money at the moment. 33.68, we bought it. Where is it now? 33.47. Be interesting to watch that one today. We looked at platinum, sterling yen. Yeah, great trend this year in sterling yen. Not so much at the moment, but the trend is still up for me anyway on sterling yen. That's going back to the March lows. It's interesting. It came right back down to the old support and it held. So I wonder if we will get another look at 156. I've still got a trade open on sterling yen from sort of in here, I think. It's been a great market to trade on the way up. And it's lost some momentum in recent months, sterling yen. But overall, that trend is still up. If I didn't have a trade on at the moment, I'd probably rather sit on my hands and wait to see if it dips back below 150 and do the buyers come back out again. So let's see. Sterling yen, Tesla. Not the Tesla for. I think I've still got a trade on Tesla in this account somewhere. I think. Hold on a sec. There we go. From the 18th of May. So buying at 580. They're 685 at the moment. I think that trend on Tesla is still up for my money. Looks all right, doesn't it? There's the trend on Tesla. It sort of had a little mess around the trend line, didn't it? But I think we are in sort of perhaps a new trend since May. So I think it looks positive. I think if it breaks 700, it's not too far away at the moment. Perhaps we see a bit more momentum coming into it. But for me, overall, the trend on Tesla is still up, way off the highs, $900 highs in Jan. But still positive, I think, for Tesla. Dollar yen, to that. Domino's Pizza. Domino's Pizza. It's another one that seems to have gone ballistic. Clearly, of course, done well out of. That's a great trend over the years, isn't it? Done well out of the pandemic, no doubt. And again, the only problem for me is, well, where would you be? Where would you put your stop loss, or where would I put my stop loss now, if I was a buyer? I don't know. Perhaps the other side of 464. I'm guessing, was that on results or something? They've zoomed so quickly. But a great trend, that, but difficult to know where to put a stop. We looked at natural gas. It's that Paycom software. Paycom software. What do they do? Cloud-based human capital management. Is that HR for those of us who are a bit old? It's a bit of a strange one, isn't it? It's a bit. I suppose it's interesting. This, where you could argue. I think there's an argument for being a buyer and there's an argument for being a seller, which is really sitting on the fence, isn't it? You could argue. I'd probably rather be. Rather be a buyer, to be honest. I mean, the longer term trend is up. I suppose we had this correction off the highs, hadn't we? I'd rather be a buyer, definitely. So we had this correction off the highs, and I suppose if you really didn't like them and wanted to go short, this is the perfect place to go short, to see if it runs out of steam ahead of these old highs around, well, where it is now, pretty much at 402. It looks like it's breaking out at the moment. For me, I'd probably rather buy a dip, see if we get a dip on it. But it's strong. It looks like you've broken out this correction that's been in place since December. It's a bit of bearish divergence on the RSI, which can suggest perhaps it's going to run out a bit of steam. But I think if it was weaker, if it weakened from here, for me, I'd be looking to be perhaps a buyer on a dip. So that's an interesting one. Paycom software. There's something in Spanish, but I don't speak Spanish, unfortunately. John Deere. Yes, John Deere. I did have trade in John Deere, but I'm out of it. The old tractor manufacturer. I still think it's positive. We did have this trend that it has fallen out of, but I would still rather be a buyer. If I was a buyer now, I'd want my stop probably on the side of 325. So it's lost some momentum, I think, John Deere, but overall still looks positive. What do you think about Amazon? Beat? Yeah, we looked at those. We actually did a trade on Amazon, so we looked at those. I wonder if it's overreacted. Let's see. I think the low it hit yesterday could be a key one for short term. Let's see how it performs today. But I think I'd take the view the market has overreacted as long as that 3,300 low holds on Amazon. Will Boeing stocks fly higher as international flights rising? Well, I wonder, because I remember Boeing has recovered quite well anyway, hasn't it? So there's the Boeing chart. So it has recovered. It was $100. It's more than doubled off the March low, Boeing. But that trend is still up. And we had the perfect move, again, to the trend line in July. So for me, I'd rather be a buyer than a seller. And I'd want my stop, the closest I'd want the stop, the other side of 200. But probably even the other side of the Jan low, which is 189. So I think, it's not going to be a surprise that suddenly there are more international flights, are there? We all know that's coming. So I wouldn't expect a massive reaction from the stock price to that because the news is out there. But overall, I think that trend is still up. Do you think coffee US will have another push back? Coffee had a heck of a move, didn't it? We had, I did have a trade on coffee and I came out of it, and I'll be looking to buy the dip. But we had that massive move. See it here, that it was what, July, beginning of July is about 150. Then it trades up to 213. Massive move, obviously. And that was because the news behind it was because we had freezing temperatures, I think, in Brazil, in a lot of the growing regions in Brazil. And they'd had a bad drought anyway, so the crop was looking a bit vulnerable anyway. And clearly that didn't help. So for me, I'd be a buyer of coffee on the dip, but it's still dipping for now. We had a great trend in coffee anyway since November last year. So for me, it'd be interesting to see if it pushes a bit further down from here. Do we see it start to build a base? So let's see. Let's see what happens. Do you think Alibaba is finally forming a base? Let's have a look. We were short those, weren't we? And I took the short off and went long, and I guess I've been stopped out since then. I don't know. I suppose, again, an aggressive trade, and a really aggressive trade to be a buyer now with a stop the other side of the March lows at 170. I think if it went below 170, you could expect a much deeper sell-off, couldn't we? I mean, clearly, I think caught up in some of the Chinese stock sell-off this week. I mean, I think if you really wanted to buy it, there's a lot to be said for patience, and I don't think it's going to reverse and suddenly be $250 overnight. So I'd quite happily sit that one out and see what happens. But perhaps these old March lows, 2020 lows, end up being pivotal. Let's see what happens. US Steel. What's US Steel? Let's look at those. I don't think we've looked at these, have we? US Steel. I think it looks a little bit like Deere, the old John Deere chart, where we'd had a great trend, fallen out of the trend, but it's really reversed, isn't it? I probably would have been caught out by that, where it sells off and then it just absolutely recovers. So for me, I would be a buyer, but I'd rather be a buyer on a dip. Do we get a dip? Who knows? So for me, I'd want my stop the other side of $20. So I'd rather buy a dip than buy into strength. But for me, it looks positive. The fact, when a market, so for me, when a market breaks down and then reverses like that, that does show some strength. So let's see. Let's see what happens. Any tips for patience in trading? Good question. I mean, let's be honest, even the best traders have experienced this problem at some point in their life. Yes, I'm sure they have. I just want to have a look at my S&P traders doing. I think if you can not sit in front of a screen all the time, I think is a great thing. If you can just get up and do something else, go for a walk around. And I think one of the things that can help patience is to not look at short-term charts. For me, for my own trading, I look at daily charts and hourly charts. I've got no interest in looking really short-term. And I think that can really help with the patience. If you think, well, I've got to wait at least an hour for my trade to set up if you're looking at a daily chart. But I think getting away from the screen and not looking at the screen is a really good idea. But no, patience is definitely hard. It's very important, of course, but it's a difficult one. But I think, not watching stuff, physically transporting yourself somewhere else is not a bad idea. What are we saying? Starbucks. Starbucks was one of them. Starbucks. Trend is up on Starbucks. So what have they done? So they were $50 in March, $122 today. Let's have a look. So I would say, I would pick the trend off that probably, a bit more of a gentle trend. So for me, I'd be a buyer. For me, it's bullish. It moved out to, I don't know if that's all-time highs. I think it probably is all-time highs. Moved out to all-time highs, touched 127.50. So for me, I'd be a buyer because the trend is up and blah, blah, blah. The closest I'd want my stop would be the other side of these lows. And they're only the lows from 11 days ago, aren't they? So for me, I'd be a buyer on dips in Starbucks. Yes, we have looked at gold. Dollar Canada. So USD CAD. I did a trade on it this week, and it's gone completely the wrong way, straight away. Dollar Canada. I do wonder if we've seen this big trend in the US dollar reverse. So, that is a classic major trend reversal thing. And this has been an interesting one to watch next week, actually. dollar Canada, I think, to see if this recovery that's been going on since the 1st of June, so we're 2 months into this, does it hold? Do we see the buyers come back out? So I wouldn't be a buyer today because it's still weak, but we've got a lot of support running from 122.50 through to 123, 124. It's going to be an interesting market to watch next week. Let's flip it over to an hourly chart and see what it looks like. So you can see that trend since June. So I'd be watching to see if we see it build something of a base next week. Let's see what happens. But yeah, it's not done well for me this week. Ericsson. So look at Ericsson. Ericsson, ADS, each representing, I don't know. I'm a bit suspicious of the data here because that's a big move. We haven't got much data, unfortunately, so I can't really look at Ericsson in any detail. We've only got a little bit of data on that one. Tilray, I think I did Tilray on the stocks channel the other week, which is the marijuana stock, isn't it? If I remember. Yeah, and I thought it looked just a bit. What do you think? I mean, it looks just a bit weak overall, doesn't it? I mean, I think it was caught up in the whole meme frenzy in Feb. Touched $66. Today is $15. So for me, I mean, perhaps it's trying to break out of that trend. I need to flip it over to the hourlies to make much sense of this. So perhaps it's an interesting one to watch next week, Tilray, because perhaps we are finally seeing it have a go and break out of that trend. So for me, I'm quite happy to be a little bit patient here because it's only the last couple of days we've seen some of these crazy moves going on where it's gone from 12 to 17 and currently trades at 15. So I think let's have a look at it perhaps next week. But maybe we're seeing the first attempts to break out of this bit of a downtrend that's been in place for a couple of months. Here we looked at Platinum, Rollins. Look at Rollins. What do they do? Rings a bell. Oh, it's not loading. I don't think we cover that. It's not available. I don't know why it's not available. I haven't got any data on it either. Sorry, I can't do that one. What are your thoughts about huge differences between Moderna, BioNTech, Pfizer? Oh, I got absolutely no opinion, to be honest. I couldn't even tell you the first thing about those. So I would just personally look at the charts. You know, I don't know anything about the difference between the fundamentals of how well they're doing. If you look at Moderna's doing great, isn't it? Their stock price is doing really well. Moderna trending up. Hit highs for this trend just a couple of days ago. And then you look at AstraZeneca, I think I can remember from memory, it's a fairly boring chart, isn't it? There we go. So, no, I don't really know why they're all performing so differently. Sainsbury's, I do have shares in Sainsbury's, actual physical shares in my ISA Sainsbury's. I think a lot of some of these supermarket stocks in the UK have been lifted because of this Morrison's bid that came in, but Sainsbury's was doing well before that anyway. I think I bought in about here somewhere, so more than a year ago now, just again thinking that the trend was over. I think we've got a bigger downtrend than this somewhere else, but for me, I'm still in Sainsbury's. So, and that trend is still up, something like that. So, good support down at £2.50. Will it break the high? I don't know. See what happens. If I didn't own them now, would I buy them up here? Maybe not. Wait to see if you get a bit of weakness. But no, certainly been a good performer, the old Sainsbury's, and that trend is still up. Can we have a look at SM Energy? SM Energy. What do they do? US petroleum and gas company with a head office in Denver, Colorado. I think this is an interesting one, again, because it's breaking out of its trend, but again, for me, that doesn't necessarily mean the trend is over. So for me, I could be tempted to be a buyer at 18.53, and I put my stop probably down at 14 or somewhere. So I think that's interesting, that it's got knocked back quite hard, broken that trend, but it hasn't really broken any previous major lows. So I could be tempted to bet that we could see a bit of a bounce back for that. And it's oversold, or it has been oversold for fans of the RSI. So it's been pretty oversold down there. So let's see. Reliance, who's Reliance? Is it Reliance Steel? Is that the one? Will it break 20? Oh no, it can't be. Must be someone else. Don't know. I don't think we cover that reliance though. Arthur J. Gallagher. Plans design full array customized insurance and risk management programs. It's interesting. It's a heck of a trend off the March lows, wasn't it? $67. Is it dollars? I'm guessing it's dollars. To 150, massive move, and it's gone a little bit boring since then, hasn't it? So I think for me, I would argue that trend is still just about up, and it's right on the trend line now. So if I had to do a trade, I'd be a buyer. The only question is, where would your stop go? Probably the closest I want my stop, the other side of 130. But it's just been a bit of a drift, hasn't it, for the last couple of months or so. So let's see how that pans out. So quite a few interesting things there. I think we're bang on 3:30 my time. So I think we'll wrap things up there. But as usual, you're watching on YouTube now. If you're not subscribed, if you could subscribe to our channel, go to Capital.com to find out more about the company. DavidJonesTrading.com to find out more about me. David.jones@Capital.com with any questions. Follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. And that's it. Thanks for coming along. We'll do it all again next week. It's the payrolls, of course, next Friday. So we could have a bit of some volatile stuff to look at when we do it next Friday. Don't forget to subscribe to our stocks channel, which is in the description for this one. Good luck with your trading, and we'll see where we are this time next week.